the infusion of positive energy into the lives of single Latter-day Saints everywhere. This is Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps, to the wonderful, splendiferous, joyous episode of Joy in the Journey Radio. I'm Lance, your host for Joy in the Journey Radio. Today, we're broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm actually traveling on my way to a professional conference in Albuquerque. So, I'm here in Las Vegas, and so you see the digs behind me are a little different. Today. I wanted to introduce book club. It's time for us to dig in to this concept that I shared with you earlier about, approximately once a month, we'll have a discussion centered around a book, and the whole intention with this, as it is with everything, I mean, we're just looking to expand the mind in answering the question, what does it mean for Latter-day Saint singles to thrive? How can we thrive as Latter-day Saint singles? And so I want to get into that this episode. I'm a little awkward here because I got I'm out of my usual setup, right? So here we go, peeps. Here's the book that we're gonna talk about today. Gosh, the lighting is horrible here. I don't know if you can see this. Maybe you can't. I don't know. Okay, that's kind of good right here. Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is the book we're going to talk about today. And I wanted to start with this book because I first read it a couple years back, and I was really blown away with it. I can't say enough good things about this book. What got me interested in it was actually a general conference address. I don't know if any of you remember from a couple years or so back, there was a member of the 70, and don't ask me to remember the guy's name because I couldn't tell you, right? I mean, there's so many 70s these days, I can't keep track of them all. But I heard this general conference address from the 70 who was talking about the British cycling team and how they came out of nowhere to become, premier team, winning all these awards. Tour de France, the Olympics, and the whole thing about it was, they were just making 1% improvements. Every day they would look to improve just 1%. And this is, he actually, if you look at the notes for the conference address, I mean, he cites this book. He cites that book. So, I was looking at that and said, okay, let's take a look at the book. So I bought it, I read it, and I was blown away. I mean, the guy is just so spot on about so many things. And, ideally I want book club to be a discussion between different people. And of course I don't have that today because I don't have my co-host yet. I'm still looking for international guests. So it's just you and me, peeps. Just you and me. So I thought I'm going to deviate a little bit from what I would call the ideal situation, since I don't have the other people to form a discussion with. And normally what we would do is we would each present a quote that really impressed us from the book and use that as a platform for discussion. And again, all of this addressed with the idea of, how can Latter-day Saint singles thrive in their single years? What can the book that we're reading teach us about thriving during our single years? And I can't say enough about this. I mean, it's talking about just anybody, right? Because it's talking about human nature and the way that habits play into our human nature and the role between the habits we have and the results we get, which is something I wrote a book on, some years ago. So in that context, reading through the book, I was just fascinated with everything this guy is bringing out here. So for me to actually talk about, I can't just pick one thing. The book is filled with so many things to talk about. go through. I will say this. One thing I was really impressed with that comes to mind is this idea, and I've talked about it before, where we get so caught up in wanting an end result, right? We want to change an end result that we're getting, and so you know, we try something new, and it doesn't quite work out, and we don't see results as soon as we want, and we just give up and quit. And there are psychological reasons for why all of that is happening, and he goes into it here in the book, which is why, if you want to thrive as a Latter-day Saint single, if you want to thrive in your single years, it kind of makes sense that you would need to understand, hey, how is it that, the habits I have are leading me to the results that I don't want? And how do I change that? How do I leverage the human mind and the way that we're naturally hardwired to lead me to the place where I want to be and not the place where I don't want to be? And so, that was my primary interest in bringing up this book for a book club. So with that introduction, I'll just finish out by saying, we get so caught up in looking for an end result when what we really need to be doing is changing our identity. And he goes and talks about how, all you need to do is just start. It doesn't take anything big. Just start with something small. Cast a vote, if you will, for the identity that you want to adopt in your life. And you'll take this inside out approach where if you change the identity, then the identity will naturally gravitate to the habits that will then naturally produce the results that you're looking for in your life. So many of us do it backwards. We're going outside in. We're focused on the end result. How do I change this end result? And we don't do anything about the identity that's inside. And so I love this perspective, because when you think about the challenges of LDS singles life, so many of us are not getting the results we want because we're not focused inside out. We're focused outside in, right? We're trying to change a result, an end result on the outside. And what we really need to do is change what's going on in here, because every one of us is broadcasting a certain amount of energy, a certain type or quality or character of energy. And, it's directly, corresponds to who we are inside, what we are inside. So if you don't change that identity, then you're not going to be able to change that energy that you're broadcasting, that other people pick up. And they, for the most part, are not conscious of it, but they sense it, right? They're aware of it on a subconscious level. And they get to say something's not right here. So tie this in with how men and women naturally think. If you're a woman trying to attract a man and you're not broadcasting the right energy, then guess what? It makes intellectual, logical sense for a man to say, you know what, I'm not feeling something right here. This doesn't seem right. Something's not right here. And for him to just say, I reject this. Flip that around. Okay. For a man trying to attract a woman and you're broadcasting the wrong energy, woman making decisions based on emotional logic, the emotionally logical conclusion from feeling the wrong type of energy is, I don't feel good. And of course, if you don't feel good, you reject. So it makes a lot of sense to me that we need to focus on changing that identity on the inside. This corresponds very well with all the teachings of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I mean, he was always focused on changing the inward person. And, he contrasted that with the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the scribes, who were always concerned about external behavior, what things look like on the outside. They were going outside in. But the Savior, our Lord Jesus Christ, went inside out. I'm reminded of that famous quote from President Ezra Taft Benson, and I'll just paraphrase it here because I don't think I got the recording quite right. But he basically said that the world seeks to change men, from the outside in, but Christ changes us from the inside out. He changes us on the inside, and then, men then change their environment on the outside. So I think that idea, that concept, is a really beautiful perspective to have when we're thinking about how do we confront the challenges of Latter-day Saint singles life. So getting back to the book here, what I thought to do is, I could go through, and he's got like all kinds of things that we could talk about here. But what I really thought would be interesting is for me to pick out some quotes from one of the chapters toward the end of the book, where he talks about genetics. So he's got basically his 4 laws: cue, craving, response, reward. And I find it to be an interesting model. I don't think it's inaccurate. I think it could be very useful and helpful, especially when you're looking at habits or anything really connected with human behavior. But instead of getting into any of that, I thought let's take a look at some of this genetic stuff, because he brings up this question about genetics. It's like, do some people have better results just because they were born into it? I mean, can anybody really achieve the maximum success that we all dream about? Or is there some genetic determination that says if you don't have the right genes, that you're just not cut out for it? And I wanted to focus on this chapter of the book for book club because it relates very well to something that I think a lot of us are concerned about as Latter-day Saint singles, but we're not really talking about. No one really mentions it. We sort of do, but we don't really tackle it head on. And that is, some people are blessed with, genetic characteristics that just make them more physically attractive. And if you've got the natural mindset, of course, that physical attractiveness is going to weigh in heavily on the final decision. Do I accept or reject? Is somebody agreeable enough? It's going to play into it. And so some of us are wondering, I know I need to have this thing called marriage in the temple in order to progress to the highest degree of exaltation in the celestial kingdom, but I can't seem to get that because I don't have the worldly characteristics that, I haven't been blessed with the genetics to bring me those worldly characteristics that I need in order to make an eternal covenant, which is the question I know I've wrestled with for many years, especially when I was in my 30s. It sickened me. It just sickened me to think that I can't progress spiritually because I'm not worldly enough. That dichotomy is something that I think a lot of us are struggling with. And so I was very interested in this chapter where he talks about genetics and the role that genetics plays in achieving success. And so he starts out by talking about a couple of Olympic athletes. Michael Phelps, who was not only the greatest swimmer in the world, but one could argue the greatest Olympian, because he's actually won more Olympic medals than anyone for any sport at any time. So, I mean, really, really successful individual, one might say. And then he talks about this runner from Morocco, and I know I'm not up on my Arabic, so I'm probably going to slaughter this guy's name. Hicham El Girouj. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but forgive me if I'm not. But anyway, the guy was just like, one of the greatest middle distance runners of all time. And so he talks about how, the genetics for each of them actually contribute to their success. Michael Phelps simply has a body that makes him a better swimmer, and El Girouge has a body that gives him, makes him a better runner. And so, he brings up this question about, um, what if their bodies were switched and they were trying to do the same things, but they had a different body? And of course, very clearly, he explains logically how they would not have had the success that they would have had. So, um, that brings up this question of, do you need to have genetics, the right genetic sequences in order to achieve the success that you want? And his answer I found was very interesting. Listen to what he says here. Quote, "The secret to maximizing your odds of success is to choose the right field of competition. This is just as true with habit change as it is with sports and business. Habits are easier to perform and more satisfying to stick with when they align with your natural inclinations and abilities. Like Michael Phelps in the pool or Hickam El Jarouge on the track, you want to play a game where the odds are in your favor. Embracing this strategy requires acceptance of the simple truth that people are born with different abilities. Some people don't like to discuss this fact. On the surface, your genes seem to be fixed, and it's no fun to talk about things you cannot control. Plus, phrases like biological determinism make it sound like certain individuals are destined for success and others doomed to failure. But this is a short sighted view of the influence of genes on behavior. So he goes in and talks about the role that genetics play in determining our success. And basically what it comes down to is it depends on your context, right? It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So he says, you want to look for those contexts in which your genetics give you an advantage. Well, if I take that and apply that to the earlier question I had about LDS singles life, it sounds like what this guy is saying. If we take his recommendation and apply it, it sounds like the recommendation is that some of us who aren't blessed with the right genetics shouldn't even be dating. I disagree with that, and I think if we delve further into the chapter, he'll provide some evidence for why that's not the right conclusion we should be making. Because he says he's setting up this question: how do I figure out where the odds are in my favor? How do I identify the opportunities and habits that are right for me? Because you got to have the right context in order to succeed. How do I find the right context? Good question. The first place we will look for an answer is by understanding your personality. And then he talks about the effect of genetics on personality, which I found fascinating. The way that we respond to a lot of things is largely influenced by genetics. And in fact, he was talking about researchers who were looking at doing research to connect behaviors with different genes. And after a while, they just stopped looking for connections because they could not find a behavior that was not influenced by genetics. Now, notice I didn't say determined. I said influenced. Okay. We still have agency. We can still choose. But it's interesting to note that a lot of us are just on autopilot. And so we're just going with what our natural inclinations are. We're not thinking about what we're doing. So he says our habits are not solely determined by our personalities, but there's no doubt that our genes nudge us in a certain direction. Our deeply rooted preferences make certain behaviors easier for some people than for others. You don't have to apologize for these differences or feel guilty about them, but you do have to work with them. A person who scores lower on conscientiousness, for example, will be less likely to be orderly by nature and may need to rely more heavily on environment design to stick with good habits. The takeaway is that you should build habits that work for your personality. People can get ripped working out like a bodybuilder, but if you prefer rock climbing or cycling or rowing, then shape your exercise habit around your interests. If your friend follows a low carb diet, but you find that low fat works for you, then more power to you. If you want to read more, don't be embarrassed if you prefer steamy romance novels over nonfiction. Read whatever fascinates you. You don't have to build the habits everyone tells you to build. Choose the habit that best suits you, not the one that is most popular. There is a version of every habit that can bring you joy and satisfaction. Find it. Habits need to be enjoyable if they are going to stick. This is the core idea behind the fourth law. So I love this concept, right? It's like, well, okay, so if you're not genetically disposed to be physically attractive, don't play that game. Don't play in that arena because you're not likely to win. You need to play the dating game in a different arena. You need to be playing up to your strengths and focusing on what comes easier for you. He goes on to talk about, and I love this idea of where he talks about Scott Adams and why Scott Adams is hugely successful. And, in an interview with Adams, Adams regularly admits this. He says, I'm not like a brilliant artist. I mean, I'm not necessarily the funniest guy on the planet, but I'm a good enough artist and a good enough comedian that when I combine that with my experience in the business world, I have a niche that I just excel at better than anybody. And it's that niche that he's created for himself, that specialization that allows him to be a success. The author of the book here, James Clear, talks about how when he was in college, he majored in biomechanics, which, for where he went to school was not an actual established program. So because there was nobody else doing his program, he was able to feel like a success because it's like he can't compare himself to anybody. There is no comparison. And isn't that sort of like, someone who's like super successful? It's like, well, he's so obviously successful. You can't compare him with anybody. It's the same sort of thing. It works. And it's like he felt great doing it because, he had his niche, his specialization. And so I thought, what if we applied that concept to LDS dating? That if instead of trying to succeed in the context where we're not genetically predisposed, we find those areas where that we naturally gravitate to, that are aligned with our personality, that are aligned with our interests, our natural gifts and talents that God has given to each one of us individually. And we've all got a different set. So find what gravitates to you naturally, find your strengths and play off your strengths. Look to become agreeable enough in the context of your specialization. I think this is a fantastic idea to play around with. Um, um, he talks about the role of luck in all of this. He says there is an element of luck in this, but I love what he says here at the end where he's talking about specialization. He says specialization is a powerful way to overcome the accident of bad genetics. The more you master a specific skill, the harder it becomes for others to compete with you. Many bodybuilders are stronger than the average arm wrestler, but even a massive bodybuilder may lose at arm wrestling because the arm wrestling champ has a very specific strength. Even if you're not the most naturally gifted, you can often win by being the best in a very narrow category. Boiling water will soften a potato but harden an egg. You can't control whether you're a potato or an egg, but you can decide to play a game where it's better to be hard or soft. If you can find a more favorable environment, you can transform the situation from one where the odds are against you to one where they are in your favor. I love this idea of specialization. And so You know, think about that for a moment. This is what I want to leave you with the program today, is to think about this idea of specialization and how you can specialize and apply that specialization to the context of LDS dating. You know, we've long talked on the program about the need to find a personal ministry and how a personal ministry can actually help us cross paths with that special someone that we're looking for, right? Because if you find somebody who's going to help you go where your personal mission will take you, okay, you found somebody that you've got a similar life direction, and that's one of the big foundational pieces you need for a successful long-term relationship. Are you moving in the same life direction? So developing the specialization, you know, with your personality, your interests, your talents, your abilities, and rolling that into a personal mission, a personal ministry, if you will, where, you know, you're making a unique contribution to the world, and you're putting your life in a certain direction of what you want to achieve, accomplish, contribute, and you know, you're going off in that direction. You know, you're more likely to interact and cross paths with someone who's going to be aligned with that life direction. And so, you know, that's something that I think all of us should really give thought to. I think too many of us are just, you know, going out into this huge pool where everybody's swimming, and, you know, we're not getting very far because, you know, we can't make waves because everybody else is splashing around us. You know, to make waves, you got to go to where the water's blue, to where no one else is swimming. Again, you got to specialize. And so this is the message that I would leave with you today, that, you know, if you're having difficulty trying to find your way through this, you know, thing we call dating and becoming agreeable enough, you know, one aspect that I would encourage you to think about is, well, are you swimming in the right pool? Are you playing the right game? You know, look at the context that you're moving in, and then um, consider that. You know, and if you see that you need to change, then make a change. You know, again, if you haven't read this book, highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. You don't want to just borrow this from the library. You want a copy for your own personal library. That's just absolutely fantastic. I can't say enough about it. There's so much more in here that we could go over that talks about LDS singles life. But that's all I'm going to leave with you today. So hopefully that was enjoyable for you. Again, you know, I want book club in the future to be a place where we come and talk about the ideas in wonderful books. And certainly, you know, there's that verse in the Doctrine and Covenants that talks about, you know, looking out for great books and seeking out after knowledge and learning more about the world around us. And I think that's a key element in learning how to thrive as Latter-day Saint singles. So that's the book for this day. For next book club, here's the book we're going to read for next time: The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Okay. The subtitle here, I love it: The Timeless Art of Turning Trials into Triumph. If this doesn't have anything that's not like directly applicable to LDS singles, I mean, there's got to be something in there, right? So this is the book for next time. So, you know, be warned, people. You want to participate in book club for February? You know, here's the next book we're going to be reading. So go ahead and start digging into it. And you know, with that, we'll wrap up the program today. Thank everyone for your attention. I hope you got something out of the program. I hope I gave you something of benefit, because that's the whole reason why I'm doing Join the Journey Radio. If I did bring you something that was beneficial for you, then I'm glad, because that's why I'm doing this. And if I didn't, then I'm sorry. I'm trying. But come back next time, and maybe we'll have better luck then. So until next time, this is your host reminding you there's joy to be had all along your journey. So take that joy and journey on.